Hello, and welcome to today's episode of the Dead Man Walking podcast. I am your host, Repeatedly Dead Fred, author of the medical trauma memoir, The Summer I Died 20 Times, which is actually what happened to me, and that's how I got the name Repeatedly Dead Fred. Today, I'm with Stephen Beker, who I've probably known for a good 12, 15 years off in that range. Um, Stephen is actually my first guest that suggested a title, an actual title for his podcast. So the title he suggested is The Intersection of Actuarial Science, Ultramarathons, and Counseling Therapy. So that hits the mark for a lot of the things I like to cover in my foundations of this podcast. So we'll get some business and financial literacy through the actuarial, health and fitness through the marathoning and counseling therapy, and maybe a joke or two from this very serious looking guy. So, Stephen, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for being on.
Thank you. It's a pleasure just to hang out with you, even if we have to be recorded to do it.
So, where did the title of this podcast come from?
So I realized have a lot of passions that on the surface may seem to have nothing to do with each other.
Mhm.
Yet each of these things have are I think a window into my personality and into who I am. And I think it's true for all of us. We may have seemingly completely unrelated interests, hobbies, vocations, but there are snippets of each that tell us a lot about the people.
Mhm. Well, having worked with some actuaries over time and knowing a little bit about the process of becoming an actuary, I could say that for a lot of people, it is quite the marathon. So I can get that direct link between the school and the grind. Ultra marathons are an extra grind. You want to talk a little bit about the difference between a regular and an ultra?
Sure. So technically, an ultra marathon is an inch or anything more than a marathon itself. So standard marathon, which you may or may not know, what the distance was dates back to a messenger who, in the day in Greek times before they had email and phones, they had messengers that would run with important information from one place to another. And I don't remember all the details, but basically someone ran 26 miles and then dropped dead. And that seemed to capture people's imagination as a good thing to do. Perhaps it was people suggesting to the people they don't like, hey, why don't you run 26.2 miles and see what happens? But
Mm-hmm.
nevertheless, it's caught on as a real standard. It's the popular choice of distance for people that really want to challenge themselves and accomplish a great feat in distance running. But there's always outliers in society. So there's people who say what's normally the top of the mountain, people will find another higher mountain. And you see ultra marathons that are anywhere from 50K, which doesn't sound like a lot more than the 42.2 marathon, but when you've done 42.2, another 7.8
Mm-hmm.
is not such an easy feat. But there are marathons that the longest one that I know is a 3,000-mile race that's done at a track over a period of months. So, and there's a lot in between. So there's a
Yeah.
whole host of things. And
So, how
what
many
that does,
pairs of shoes
yep,
would you need to run you know, that 3,000 mile race?
I don't, I don't know. So the one of the good things about having races like that is that people like me, who in their own way are kind of crazy, I prefer the 24-hour marathon. I can
Mm-hmm.
look at them and go, well, those guys are crazy. So I
Mm-hmm.
really have no idea because, um, the difference between running a marathon, a 10K, and 100 yards, it's really three different sports. It
Mm-hmm.
takes different physiological and psychological um, aspects. There's aspects to it. And the same
Mhm.
way, a 50K race is a different animal than a 24-hour run, or a 6-day run, or a 3,000. So I have no idea. That's crazy. I would never do that. So
Mhm.
I don't have an answer.
So would you suggest, and we're going to talk about counseling in a second, um, that the people who do marathons and ultra marathons and 24s and 3000s, stuff like that, might have a bit of a personality issue that should be explored by a counselor? They might be slightly masochistic and lacking something.
I can't speak for others. A lot of the people that are into ultra marathons, it's not something they just dabble their toes in, right? It's you don't just run a few times and then go out and run for 24 hours or multiple days. So I'm kind of an outlier because I have a job, I have a
Mm-hmm.
family, I have other responsibilities, and I'm not willing to revolve my life around running. So I can't speak for others. For me, there's something that just invigorates me when I'm challenging myself, or the opponent is myself, and I'm trying to do something that I don't even know if I can do.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what really drives me. Others, it's just a passion. Like, would you say someone that is accomplished pianist and they love playing music and they could do it 10 hours a day? Do they need counseling?
Mm-hmm. Possibly. But I don't know if you're so destroyed physically and mentally as you are after running maybe for 24 hours straight. Maybe I'm wrong, but it's, you know, again, slightly different animal.
Yeah, I would say actually the feeling it's more tougher mentally, I think, than physically,
Mm-hmm.
because um yeah, certainly it takes a toll on you physically, but a lot of it is just keeping going through, persevering, not giving
Mm-hmm.
up. You run for 4 hours, and that's a pretty good workout for most people. And then your mind starts saying, do I really want to do 20 more hours of this?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So you could talk yourself out of things very easily. Inevitably, you have ebbs and flows. Like
Mm-hmm.
at 4 hours, you may feel great. And at 5.5 hours, you might feel like you don't have an ounce of energy. You feel like crap. And you like the thought of running 3 more minutes
Mm-hmm.
is, beyond and then 2 hours later, for no reason whatsoever, you start to feel like a burst of energy.
Yeah,
So
those
you have to kind
second
of
wins are amazing.
yeah, they really, really are. So you have to persevere through those, darker moments and those ebbs and flows.
Okay. So I'm looking at a picture over your right shoulder, and it's a big circle, it looks like, or depending on, it could be a donut. Not sure. But let's
That's what
circle
I was
back.
thinking too. Yeah.
Well, let's circle back to the actuarial science. So I know you're good with numbers. You know you're good with numbers. So maybe like a 30-second uh, description of what an actuary does or what you do as an actuary.
I'm going to spend 30 seconds avoiding your question by saying if you ask a lawyer what they do,
Hmm.
right, the range is so large, right? Criminal law versus litigation versus family law, estate
Hmm.
law. Ask a doctor what they do. So, well, they heal, but a foot doctor and a heart surgeon are two different worlds.
Hmm.
So actuaries in the same way. They are typically involved with insurance or pensions. But the background, the real training, the foundation that an actuary has allows them to be able to do analysis with numbers, which can be helpful in any number of fields.
Hmm. So you're helpful in any number of fields. You actually work for a
Potentially.
regulatory body.
Yes, I
Work for a
do.
right, and I forget actually. Do you do insurance companies or do you do banks?
So we regulate the banks and insurance companies.
Hmm.
I work for OSFI, the Office of the Superintendent of Financial Institutions.
Mhm. So I know actuaries are well paid. Maybe not as well in the government, but in private industry, actuaries are well paid. But yet here you are, you know, in the midst of contemplating a career change. So let's tie all these things together. Let's tie the actuarial science to the ultramarathons, to the counseling therapy, which we haven't really talked about yet. And let's get to the meat of the title of this podcast. What's going on here?
Okay. So I tried, approaching my 60s. Well, really at the time was more in my mid 50s. I realized that, time is finite, and all those things that I thought I'd get to someday, some of them have been on the list for 30 years. It's time to
Mm-hmm.
get going on them. And I did a real thorough analysis of what I like to do, what gives me pleasure, where my strengths are, what my values are, what my priorities are. And I realized I have a passion for a couple of things, ultra marathoning being one of them, which I've already been doing. So it's not like something I have never been addressing. I have a passion for college football, which I'm doing, but it's not necessarily something that I wanted to spend more time on. Probably need
Mm-hmm.
to spend less time on. And I have a passion for relationships. I am hopeless romantic, but I'm since I was a child, I've been just obsessed with understanding what relationships what makes them work, what makes them not work. And I thought maybe I could actually help people.
Can I just say how rare it is for me to have met an actuary who has emotional intelligence and relationship skills? It tends to be the stereotype of the actuaries or accountants that, they're so focused on digits that they're not focused on people so much. So how do you get that unique blend?
Um, that's a tough question. We're born. We tend to categorize people a lot. One of the things that I resented in my school days was how
Mhm.
you'd read a book and you'd summarize a character, and and I think that trained us to think of people, and you fit in this category. People are good or bad, or people are giving or not giving, or whatever it is. And the truth is, people are very complex. And like, if you see me driving in traffic, you'd think I'm the biggest a-hole. And
Mhm.
some people, that's their only experience. They've been cut off by me in traffic.
Mhm.
And other people, I may have done nice stuff with it. They think the world of me, right?
Mhm.
And there's people that think I'm funny, and other people think I've got juvenile sense of humor. So
Mhm.
we're like, even ourselves, we're much more complex than stereotyping us into a certain category. I love the
Mhm.
word intersectionality because each of us has a plethora of data points that make us unique. So even if, let's say, um, um, you are black and you are funny and you're a Muslim, not all Muslims are the same. Not all black people are the same. Not all funny people are the same. So each of us is unique. There's no two people that are alike.
Are you frozen or are you finished?
No, I'm finished. I'm sorry. Lost my train of thought there a little bit. But coming back
Okay.
to your question, so I do want to correct one thing.
Mhm.
This is not a career change.
Mhm.
I'm feeling uh, a little old to start all over again. This is something I want to do. If I end up doing it full time down the road, so be it. But I don't want to have that pressure, and I want to, as much as I can, focus on my goal of helping people,
Mhm.
especially in relationships. So that's it. I'm not giving up my day job. I'm not planning on replacing actuarial science with counseling.
Hmm.
Uh, but I don't have any set, plans. And I'm just right now I'm in school. I'm towards the end of the school. And I just want to build the tools, become as good a counselor as I can, and we'll see where it goes.
Okay, so for anybody out there looking for a counseling intern or articling student, or what do you do when you uh,
We
start
we do
counseling?
a we do we I'm a few weeks away from finishing my coursework, and then I'm just starting to look for an 8-month practicum, and
Okay.
that is basically interning, seeing some real clients. It's not just theoretical at that point,
Hmm.
under supervision and learning through practice and through guidance, how to be a real therapist.
Okay, so if anybody out there has a position that would be good for Stephen, we'll give you his contact deets at the end of the at the talk, and you can get a hold of him. I
Thank
also have to give you some bonus points. Nobody has ever used the word plethora on this podcast before. That's digging deep for a fancy smashy word.
you. Thanks. I My vocabulary is all over the place. One nice thing going back to school, maybe just a little tangent here. So I had not been in formal school since the late 80s, and I just went back a couple of years ago. I joke that, and the school's all online, like there's no classrooms, it's all online. When I was last in school and university, online is what you hung your clothes on. Like no
Mm-hmm.
kids had phones or personal computers. um and I tutor as well, and I'll meet students and go like, I don't know if I could do this. I haven't been in school in 10 years, and I'm like, oh my god, I haven't been in 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really creates a lot of energy to be learning, where a lot of people
Mm-hmm.
at my age are kind of winding down their career and thinking about just lying on the beach. I'm ramping up. My brain is working as hard as ever, especially
Mm-hmm.
doing full-time work in school. I'm surrounded by young people that have a different way of looking at the world, different experiences. So it's been a wonderful experience, and I encourage people to consider finding, if not, it doesn't have to be a new career. It could just be learning a new language, or going back to school to study history, or whatever it is. um,
Mm-hmm.
my wife laid the model down a couple of years ago when she went back to school to become a massage therapist,
Mm-hmm.
and I was so impressed and in awe of how she would work so diligently, sometimes getting up 3 in the morning because that's when she can get work done before the family demands and work demands
Mm-hmm.
started in. So I had a wonderful role model.
And on top of that, she's English as a second or third language, right? So even all the
Yes.
terminology, uh, is an extra layer that she had to go through.
Yeah, she had a background though in physical education, so at
Mm-hmm.
least a lot of the terminology she was familiar with, and just the whole background she had that was stronger than other students. I think what's more significant though was her approach. She comes from a culture that doesn't understand anything but perfection. She's
Mm-hmm.
from Japan, and as you might be aware, the sushi making or sword
Mm-hmm.
making or really anything to do in Japan is done with excellence. You are not considered an expert until you've been trained for decades and been working
Mm-hmm.
for decades. Compared to the North American model, like, okay, if someone in the office has worked on something for 2 days more than anyone else, then they're by default the expert.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, giving that example of perfection was really really inspiring. But
Mm-hmm.
at heart, I am
Yeah,
still a mediocritist.
you're hilarious. Um, So going back to the mental health aspect of going back to school, I think there's significant data that shows that people that are lifelong learners are significantly happier in their later years and show a lot less cognitive decline than people who don't do this. And I think if you go back to, probably the 60s or 70s, when people retired from, their factory jobs, their life ended pretty soon after. I don't know if that was from boredom or, what factors were in play there, but retired people live considerably longer now um, because they have more options to keep themselves occupied.
Absolutely, Fred. One of the things you've seen in some workplaces is a an option to reduce your work before retirement. It gives
Mm-hmm.
folks a chance to test the waters and see what life would be like. Because we all think about how nice it would be to not have the work pressures and have all the time in the world. But a lot of people struggle when they don't have that anchor in their life. I know if I won the lottery, and yes, it would help to buy a ticket, but if I won the lottery, I would not change anything until I figured out next steps and had some structure in place. Because I think to go from working really hard and being challenged to having nothing to get up for in the morning is not good,
Yeah,
not
one of
healthy.
the best thing that's happened to me after all this trauma is I had somebody encourage me to not only write my book, The Summer I Died 20 Times, available on Amazon, but to start the podcast. And
Mhm.
Jen Stevens, who's my intermittent fasting guru, had me on her podcast and encouraged me to start my own, and I did. And it makes a huge difference when you don't have that structure.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. By the way, your repeated dying is really throwing off the actuarial tables. Generally, actuarial science works on the assumption for life insurance, anyways, that people die once. Um, and I think there's some talk at the Society of Actuaries of having a Fred table that has a completely different set of mortality statistics. But I'll let you know where that is.
Okay. Michael Toledano, who's also an actuary, said something similar, uh, and that they look for things 1 in 100 year events. And I
Mhm.
think he said I was a 1 in 10,000 year event.
Yeah, that there's not a lot of statistics, I think, on folks with you. I might be wrong, Fred, but I
Mm-hmm.
imagine one of the reasons you're writing the book is your experience is not so commonplace.
Mm-hmm.
So it gets hard to say whether it's 1 in 10,000, 1 in 20,000. But um, so Michael's on the property and casualty side. He's a friend of mine, a great guy.
Mm-hmm.
I call that the dark side of actuarial science. But the whereas with life insurance or car insurance, you're basing your statistics on thousands and hundreds of thousands, even millions of events. Like each
Mm-hmm.
death is an event. So you get a lot of credibility when your sample size is really large. When you're looking at insuring for hurricanes or storms, your sample size is much smaller. So it's a little hard to be accurate.
Mm-hmm.
Apologize if that's too technical. If did we give a mental health warning that there may be some statistical talk in this podcast?
Hey, all the hate mail's coming to you, buddy. I'm not a part of this. So, and yeah, actuarial science, I really didn't know a lot about it before I started working at Canada Life, and I ended up working with the actuaries. And wow, that's a grind that you go through to get your certification, or is that what it's called? Yeah, certification.
Yeah, your designation,
Yeah,
your professional designation. Yeah.
yeah, and I was quite surprised that the amount of work they had to do. Most of my actuaries were actually actuarial students overseen by, one or two that actually had finished the program and survived. Um, and it's fascinating stuff. If your kids are good at math, you should have them start looking into actuarial science or data science. The math people are taking over the world.
Well, the data people are the data,
Yeah.
if you, whether it's on the analysis side or building the tools that can house and analyze the data, that's the direction. Data mining is certainly the direction things are moving towards, and then combine that with artificial intelligence, and
Mhm.
we're probably we're probably starting to drift off to a whole other podcast.
That's okay. If you look at professional sports and online gambling for professional sports, it's totally become data and number driven now. I mean, they look at statistics in the NFL and college football, which is, another one of your passions, that there's so much based on statistics and probabilities now that if you want to be the best in fantasy football, you're doing yourself a disservice if you don't do a little bit of learning how statistics work.
It's true. However, there's the human element, right? And
Mm-hmm.
these are still young people, relatively, certainly in college football. You're talking 18 to 22-year-olds, and I've got a pair of 18-year-old twins. And if you expect to be able to accurately predict their behavior tomorrow based on what they've done yesterday,
Mm-hmm.
not a good idea of how to place your bets.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is the industry still, like, you go to Vegas, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you see these big hotels. That is not, those hotels aren't built with, philanthropical donations. Like, that's the money coming from, and they continue to build because it's set up for the house to win, not the betters.
Mm-hmm.
And a professional gambler, from what I understand, if you're like hitting 58% or so, then that's, you're doing okay as a professional gambler. That's their job, is to
Mm-hmm.
study, and they're only getting it right, under 60% of the time. So
Mm-hmm.
it's I'm not an advocate for gambling as a way to make money.
Mm-hmm. So 58% is actually pretty good. If you look at, the top NHL goal scorers, if they score on 10% of their shots, they're probably in the top 50 of scoring.
Right.
Or Michael Jordan uh, said something along the lines like he failed, 70% of the time,
Right.
and he's still the greatest of all time. So, yeah. So you're saying you would have no real edge if you went to Vegas and tried to play the, not that they're recording this and nobody from Vegas can see this.
But since we once had an actual conference in Vegas, and one of the sessions was an actuary who helped one of the casinos, or a few of the casinos, designing games.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, they make it such that I like craps just because it's very easy to do the probabilities, and I bet in a way where I win, either I win very little or I lose very little, but I could play a little longer.
Mm-hmm.
So it just gives me that little thrill. But um, the way they design the odds is that the house, for every dollar that's bet, the house might win 5%. Blackjack being the best, it might be 2%. But what's happening, like, you look at a craps table, and every
Mm-hmm.
roll of the dice, there's thousands of dollars on the table. So every
Mm-hmm.
roll of the dice, it's like another $20, another $20, another $20, right? Bang, 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 bang. That adds
Mm-hmm.
up pretty quickly. If
Mm-hmm.
if you were winning only 50% of the time, you get discouraged a lot quickly. But it's almost like a slow bleed. The slot machines have actually the worst, especially the machines that are in the corners. They
Mm-hmm.
have better odds when you're at the, right near the walking path, so that the people
Mm-hmm.
walking can hear the ching ching ching.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and but even so, those are the worst odds. But you're only betting a coin at a time,
Mm-hmm.
so it doesn't. it doesn't feel like you're losing a lot because it's kind of, but also it's a slow bleed in a different way.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's why they make you use chips at the table as well, right? Because
Oh,
it
yeah.
doesn't
There's a
seem
lot of
like real money.
psychology. Yep. It doesn't hurt as much. Interestingly, credit cards have a similar effect,
Mm-hmm.
but we don't tend to think of that. So that's why a lot of, financial mentors will tell you avoid using cards, use
Mm-hmm.
cash. You'll feel
Yeah.
the pain more directly.
And of course, the banking system and the retailers, etc., don't want us to use cash because they can't track us and get our data as well.
Right, right. But that's
So,
come a long way. There, I think it was MasterCard or Visa. There was some guy who kind of pushed the idea,
mm-hmm.
and he was basically back at a time where maybe everyone wasn't as measured as closely on productivity, and the banks and the insurance companies maybe weren't as conscious of cost efficiencies.
Mm-hmm.
So he was like put in a corner, kind of okay, let him do whatever he's doing there in the corner. And to think that the leaders of banks at a point in time did not think that credit cards were worthy of their attention is just mind blowing. I have to say a disclaimer as working for Austria. I'm not in any way making comment on any specific bank, or we're talking now about an attitude that was prevalent around the world
Mm-hmm.
a half a century ago.
Well, I know when Eaton's collapsed, for our American viewers and listeners, it was Eaton's was kind of the Macy's of Canada. Um, when they were collapsing, one of the parts of the business the family fought hardest for was their credit card business, because they could charge astronomical rates, and it was still making them money even as the empire was burning. Um,
Right.
and yeah, credit cards are a whole different animal. We could have a whole discussion on my love of credit cards, not really, and the check cashing outlets and the outrageous interest rates they charge. But that would be for when I'm running for like a player. And I was finishing off saying my platform on interest rates on credit cards and check cashing places would be the platform I might run on if I was going for political office. But back to you, Steve.
Yeah. So Fred, one of the I did notice we were running out of time there. Maybe years of taking actuarial exams taught me a
Mhm,
few things like watch the clock. So,
mhm,
by the way, coming back to football, if I was younger, I would be sending my resume out to every NFL team to be their actuary for clock management.
It's unbelievable how some NFL coaches just don't have somebody on staff saying, "Hey, coach, last 3 minutes, here's what we're going to do with the timeouts and stuff like that. Keep calling the plays. I'll do the timeouts." But no, it also amazes me that they still rely on like average carries and stuff like that when they really should be looking more at the standard deviations, because one long run can make it look like you've got an average run of 4.5, 5, yards per carry. But the reality is most of your carries can probably be within 1 to 3 yards. And if you're banking those plays on getting 4.5, 5 yards, you're
uh,
missing
I,
something.
it's true, although I suspect now that they're looking even beyond that. They're looking about like how much of the yardage is because the running back, avoided a tackle, or
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to the offensive line, was opening up a hole that my mother could run
Mm-hmm.
through.
Mm-hmm. Well, your
So I
mother
think
is
there's
pretty quick.
you know, God bless her. She's 94 and a half and still has pretty good mobility. She doesn't do her days of playing cornerback and twisting her hips to stay with a wide receiver. Those days are in the past, but she's
Mm-hmm.
got pretty good straight ahead speed. So thank God, we should all be in her health and our well into our 90s.
Hmm. Absolutely. So, okay. So, where do you see your journey going in the next year or so? You're just gonna, I
I
guess
don't
you're
know what
gonna
I'm
do
having
the.
for dinner tomorrow, Fred.
Mhm,
uh, you know what? I have a belief system where it's up to us to do what we can, but we don't control everything.
mhm,
So I'm learning everything I can to be a good therapist.
mhm,
Where that takes me, I don't know. Like the practice, I'm thinking I want to do relationships and couples. I might find that I have a knack and a real gift for treating children with ADHD, just picking something out of a hat. And that's
mhm,
the direction I go. At work, I'm still trying to do the best I can and learn. And there's opportunities that you never know what's going to come up. Like some things in our industry, like climate change, cyber risk,
mhm.
are much more on the front page than they used to be 10 years ago. So it's really hard to say. What I will say is being a good husband, being there for my kids, trying to stay in shape and run. I got to do everything I can
Mhm.
to continue to know those things, but um, too difficult to make a call for 12 months, much less 5 years from now.
Do you
What about
potentially
you?
see? Oh, I'm just happy to be alive. Every day I wake up is a good day. Um,
We
I'm
should all have that attitude.
I'm, hoping that my book and my podcast take off and that I'm going to be a positive or an inspiration to people that are going through whatever challenges they're going through. I don't think, too many people are going to walk exactly in my shoes. Um, but people have a lot of challenges these days. And if I can ease that burden just, one little bit, I think I'll have done something pretty impressive. Um,
Mhm.
and if I get to a point where people are going to ask me to come speak in their organization, whether it's overcoming adversity or positive mindset, I think that that'll also be really impressive. So I guess I have to talk to my PR guy. Hey, Miles, get on it.
Well, I'm banking on you, Fred. I My resume will look a lot better if being on the repeatedly dead Fred's podcast is something that everyone recognizes.
Well, I'm up on Spotify now. I'm up on Apple Podcasts, on Google, Amazon. So, I'm a worldwide sensation if you didn't know that. You know,
Okay.
I'm sure that some point within the next 5 years, somebody is going to recognize me on the street. And then I'll know I hit the big time. So, what about possibly combining a couple of your passions and having a niche in relationship counseling for actuaries and ultra marathon runners?
So I did think of doing and it still might be a form of therapy to
Mhm,
do running and counseling. There are
mhm,
all kinds of alternative counseling that is really designed to help people be in an environment that they're comfortable.
mhm,
The standard counseling um, environment is not what most people necessarily find comfortable.
mhm,
So you may have seen, whether it's on TVs, movies, where kids are being talked to by an adult while they're playing a game.
mhm,
Well, the same thing could go for an adult too, right? If people feel in their element, they feel more comfortable themselves when they're doing yoga or art or running,
mhm,
then it just lends itself to the goals of counseling.
mhm. Yeah, you brought up a memory for me. So during COVID and the social distancing, I don't remember if it was like a group therapy um, counselor, or maybe it was Alcoholics Anonymous or something, and they couldn't meet in their regular spaces. They decided to have walks and jogs,
Mhm.
and I thought, that's pretty innovative. I thought, you know, you see a hurdle in front of you, and you say, "How do we get around this?" And
Yep.
so,
It could be that. It could be, one approach is for, let's say, take running. Okay, what challenges do you have? What obstacles? And can we draw a parallel to the challenges in your life?
mhm,
And as you learn to work through running challenges and obstacles, you can apply some of those learnings and attitude towards overcoming the obstacles in your life. So that's one aspect to kind of parallel. Another aspect is just feeling more comfortable. So one of the things that has been the biggest learning for me in my coursework on therapy is, unlike other professions where the expert is going to give you the answer, right? Like,
mhm,
we had a plumber over recently, and he's trying to explain things to me, and I could care less. I'm never going to
mhm,
fix. There's no hope that this is ever going to be useful, other than, is it working or not? Do I need to
mhm,
like not use it for 24? Just tell me what I absolutely need to know, right?
mhm,
And I go to the doctor, and yeah, I want to learn things to apply them, but I'm still looking to him for the answers. A
mhm,
good therapist is bringing the answers out from the client. They're
mhm,
co-constructing what the problem is and co-constructing what the solutions are. So in order to do that, like if I have the answers as a therapist, sit on the couch, I'll tell you them. But that's
mhm,
not the way it should work. It's, you need to share, you need to open up, you need to be thinking. And if you're in an environment that you're more comfortable, it's going to be easier for you to recognize things, to share things, and to brainstorm.
mhm. And I think if you were doing something like a run or a walk, or getting out into the, vitamin sun and vitamin green, you've got some extra endorphins that are just going to make you think a little more clearly uh, with whoever you're talking to.
Yeah. So there are therapists that will have various types of chairs. They'll have different things to occupy your hands, different balls or different fidgety things.
Mhm,
Heck, maybe even put a treadmill in the office. Uh, you can be creative. The whole concept, though, is to create a safe space for sure, but create an environment where people feel like they're in their element rather than the scary professional's office.
mhm. Yeah. I know there's some therapists that are very old school, and uh, they keep throwing the ball back at you, like, well, what do you think the problem is? Well, what do you think you should do? And they don't really help you get any clarity. And I know when I started going to therapy, that's who I had, and it was not helpful at all. So maybe there's a certain personality type that works with, but I think more therapists are more along the line of what you suggest. Is it's a partnership that
Right, right,
you're both working towards a goal.
right. Well, I mean, you do want the answer to come ultimately from
Mhm,
the client with the therapist's guidance. But if it was simple as, okay, what do you think you should do?
mhm,
Um, well, if they knew the answer to that, they wouldn't need to come to you.
mhm,
So you need to break it down more. Okay, let's deconstruct what's going on. You have a meltdown with your kids. You don't want to have that meltdown. You don't. You
mhm,
want to be more even. Okay, so not what you should do. It's okay not have a meltdown. Well, guess how that's going to go. But
mhm,
let's look at a specific example. What was going through your head? What was happening in your day to get to that stage? Right? Because you may have been having a great day versus you've been yelled at by your boss, your wife is mad at you, blah 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 blah.
Mhm.
Those are two different situations before we even get to what the kids are doing. Breaking it down, let's construct how are you feeling physically, emotionally,
Yeah.
any alternatives that went through your mind. So it's really, I mean, they use the peeling the onion as a common phrase that's used, but it's really kind of digging down. So yes, what should you do? But if you ask it at that level, then I don't have the answers. Why I come to you? That's why I come to you, right?
Mhm. Actually, the first question my therapist asks me every session, how's your mood? And,
Yeah,
okay.
I
And
think
how
that's
was it? How was it during the past week, the last 2 weeks?
yeah,
You know?
yeah. We're definitely taught to do that. I just share very quick what I found amusing.
Mhm.
So when I was a teenager, I was fighting with my parents. Nothing major,
Mhm.
but I just was frustrated, and I had a friend who had recently come out of the closet, and I know he went for some therapy. He was the only person that I knew who went for therapy. So I asked him, "Hey, do you think it'd be helpful to talk to a therapist to get some ideas, have a better relationship with my parents?" It was actually one of the more mature things I've done in my life.
Mhm.
Anyway, so he said, "Yeah, it doesn't hurt. It could help you, and you get an objective opinion." He's very positive about his experience with it, and he gave me the name of his therapist. And I walk in there, and the first question he asked is, "So, how long have you been gay?" And in my first reactions, I'm sure were, "I'm not sure I like the direction of this," and I didn't know I was. So,
Mhm.
yeah, no, I don't mean anything disparaging to those who have come out of the closet. It's a very, very brave and difficult thing to do, but that wasn't what I was there for, and that was I look at that, and it's a fun story, but
Mhm.
it's a horrible mistake to make as a counselor. You're sizing someone up, you're judging. I
Mhm.
understand why he made that assumption, given who referred me, but
Mhm.
it was a horrible mistake to make.
Mhm.
So,
Did you end up actually doing any therapy with him, or you moved on to someone else?
no, I didn't know the way it works. It's interesting now, like decades later, I'm learning how to be a therapist, and I'm remembering that. I'm like, oh my god, like that's horrible. That, no, he was actually very helpful. After
Mhm.
I wasn't upset about that.
Mhm.
We did change the direction. We didn't talk about my coming out because that was
Mhm.
again not what I was there for. But he gave me some helpful, uh, ideas that helped a
Mhm.
little bit, and
Mhm.
I look at therapy as um, the way like you treat a car, right? If you wait till there's a problem, if you only take your car to the shop when there's a problem, your car's not going to do nearly as well as if you do regular maintenance. And I
Mhm.
think having someone to talk to, sometimes it could be a friend, but what you get with a therapist is someone who's more object. They're first of all they're trained, and
Mhm.
they're objective, right? They're not your friend. They can, they're not worried about calling you out on something uh, because they're doing based on evidence and based on what they're hearing. So I think it's actually a very good thing. I personally believe that every teenager could benefit from a therapist. There are so many challenges at that age that, um, and it'd be good if we got over the stigma that it's people with problems that go to therapists. We can all benefit from that. I've had a little therapy with my wife. We actually went because we were having some things we want to deal with our children, and it turned out the therapist shifted it to us. It's like you get your house completely in order, and then deal with the kids. And I've got the most wonderful wife, and we have a great relationship. But even us can get a little off course, and therapy can be a great course adjustment, much better than when you are on the verge of divorce and
Mhm.
going into therapy.
Well, in Judaism, we have a concept of find yourself a rabbi. And I forget which book it comes from. Maybe you know that. But it's not just for spiritual guidance. It's for somebody that can give you different perspectives and help you see a route that you wouldn't see on your own.
Right, right. I also know people that take that to be find a rabbi that will give you permission to do something that no other rabbi will do. But I think that's a different thing.
Yeah, that's a maybe podcast number 5 that we'll do.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So Stephen, I think I'd like to wrap up. So thank you very much for being on. And of course, if you want to continue this chat, we'll find another topic, and you will, or you'll give me a topic, and we'll bounce it around.
Well, it's been a pleasure, and like I said, I enjoy hanging out with you. If I have to be recorded to do it, so be it. So,
Well, it's not like we live across the street from each other. So anyway, to those of you who've tuned in, thank you very much for tuning into the Dead Man Walking podcast. Please like, subscribe, share. Oh, Stephen, if people want to get a hold of you for anything, how do they get a hold of you?
probably the easiest way would be to email me. My email is sbeker.yv@gmail.com. That's sbeker.yv@gmail.com. And as soon as I hire one of my teenagers to help me with some social media, I'll try and get on some of these other social media platforms.
Awesome. Thank you again. See you soon. Thank you, everybody. Have yourself a great week. Bye bye.
Bye bye.